Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make an animated dotted line renderer like the one you're seeing me move around here. I'm going to show you how to do this in the most simple and efficient way possible, and we're not going to skip any of the steps, so I'm going to show you how to use your own custom sprite, how to import it, how to set it up, how to make it follow your mouse, how to make it dotted, and how to make it animated. There are some other videos on YouTube that show how to do this, but honestly, from what I've seen, they either skip some of the essential steps, or they're just animating it in far more complicated ways than what you actually need to do using shaders. You don't need to do any of this, it's kind of overkill, so we're just going to do it in a really simple and efficient way, and you're going to get a great looking animated dotted line that you can use for your projects. Now the very first thing I need to do here in the scene is add a line renderer component. I'm just going to add that to my input manager, and I'm going to put in some sample points to show you how this is by default going to look. -3, 3, -2. Note that even though this is a 2D game, I actually have to put something in the Z to get it to show up. 3, -3, and -2. And you might also have to change the sorting layer down here from something. In this case, it's working, it's showing up in the game view, but I'm going to change it to foreground anyway. And then I'm just going to add a default line onto this, and it's going to change its color. Now, why am I putting this on the input manager rather than the character? Well, if you look here, if I move the X coordinates around of this input manager, even though I'm moving this, the line is staying put. And that's because it's just listening to where I'm setting these points to. So it really doesn't matter what component the line renderer is on, because it's only going to listen to these points that you add here. First, let's make sure that the trajectory line is following our mouse position. And this is inside my input manager script. I have a method here called show trajectory line. The only thing you really need to know is that this is being called through update. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that it's only getting shown when we're holding the mouse button down. So if input.get mouse button, and I want to make sure to get mouse button, not get mouse button down, because that would only register a single click. 0. Now we can start typing the code. So the first thing we need to do is use a reference to our trajectory line, which I've already set up here. So it's private line renderer trajectory line with a serialized field, so I can drag and drop it in the inspector. And I'm going to just make sure it's turned on first of all, so enabled equals true, and then trajectory line dot position count equals 2. What is the position count? Let me show you. That is this bit right here in the inspector, which is going to set it to size 2. You can't just add components, or you can't just add positions with the line render. You actually have to explicitly make sure it has the correct number of points before setting them. And now I actually want to set those points. So the first point is going to be trajectory line dot set position, and it's asking for two things. It's asking for an index value and a vector 3 position. Now the index value is just going to be 0, and then the next one is going to be 1, and the following point would be 2, 3, 4, etc. The position, for the start position of my line, I want it to be equal to where my character is, my defender. Now I already have a reference to my defender, so I'm just going to call active defender.transform.position with semicolon, and then we're going to set up the second point, which is index position 1, and that's going to be where the mouse position is. Now let's just get a reference to the mouse position. That's going to be of type vector 3. That can be vector 2 as well. It doesn't really matter here for a 2D game. Equals input dot mouse position. Oh, and I have to, of course, give it a name. Mouse pause equals input dot mouse position. However, this would give it to me in pixel space. I need the mouse position in world space, so I'm going to do a conversion and call camera.main.screen to world point, and then put input.mouse position in there, and then put mouse position as the second point. Let's save and test that out. First things first, let's make sure that the line renderer is hooked up to the trajectory line, and then we'll hit play and give that a try. Okay, so the line is following my mouse position. It looks big and it looks horrible, but it is basically doing what we asked it to do. Okay, now let's actually turn this line into a dotted line. And for this, we're going to need some sprites. I am going to go to the website game-icons.net, and I'm going to grab a sprite from here. I'm just going to grab something random so I can show you that this can really be done with any type of sprite you want to use. So in this case, I'm gonna just choose this cool looking spike over here. You can use whatever you want, a circle, a square. If you're going to want to color your sprite, you're going to need to make sure that it is filled in. So under here where it says gradient, you can either select radial or something. If you just want it to be a solid color, I'm going to recommend you just make something pure white. Make sure that the alpha value is set to 100 so it is totally filled in. And then here you can just download it as a PNG and save it somewhere here. So I'll just save that to my desktop. Now I have a folder here in my Unity project called Shapes. I'm just going to drag that guy in here. Now I have my spike asset. This next step, very important. Your dotted part will not work if you don't do this, so listen up. Under here, advanced, wrap mode, see where it says clamp, change this to repeat and hit apply. I repeat, if you do not do this, it will not work. Now see here under our line renderer component where we have default line, we still can't drag this on because this is asking for a material and this is a sprite. This is not the same thing. So we just need to set this up as a material. Now there's a couple of different ways we can do this. I'm gonna go here into my particles folder. I just like to keep things organized. And I'm gonna go create material. Make sure it's material and not physics material. We want a material. And there's a couple different types here we can use. You could use a transparent cutout, but I'm going to recommend that instead you use an unlit particle. So over here under particles, click the drop down, standard unlit. Now right here, maps, where next to this word albedo, I can drag and drop this custom sprite in, which would be here under my shapes folder, which is somewhere. There it is. Albedo. There we go. Now it has this black outline around it. I click here where it says rendering mode and I select cutout. There goes the black outline. That's it. Now if I go to the line renderer component on my input manager, I can drag this material in that I created, which is here, over the default line. I can just drag that over. I should probably give it a name and call it like spike material so it's clear what it actually is. Or you can click here and you can select it from here. Okay, let's hit play and give that a try. Okay, so the first thing I notice is that it is not appearing. Why is this happening? Well, I've set up a different type of material here, and it has some differences from the standard line. Actually, if I separate the game tab and just move it over here so you can see the scene view as well, and I click, you're going to see that actually it is appearing, but it's kind of hidden behind some of the background, and it's also weirdly stretched. So first, let's just take care of making sure it actually shows up. And for that, I'm going to have to go back into the code. And remember where I showed you about the Z space thing earlier? I'm going to actually have to modify this so it has a negative Z space. So just for simplicity, I'm going to say vector3 defender pos equals active defender dot transform dot position. Just so it's not quite as long to type, defender pos dot x, defender pos dot y, and then for the Z, I'm just going to manually type -1. Of course, it is because I have to now declare this as a new vector3. There we go, and the error goes away. And then I'm going to have to do the same for the mouse pos. So actually I said vector2 would work before, but really I do need to use a vector3 in this case because I'm going to have to do the same thing. New vector3, mouse pos dot x, mouse pos dot y, and then -1 for the Z. Save and let's test that out. Here we are, and you can see that this is now properly appearing in the scene, although it's all weird and stretched. And the reason that's happening is because texture mode is set to stretch, but I'm going to set this to tile. And wow, would you look at that? It tiles, and now I have this weird, freaky, spiky looking thing over here. Of course, I am in play mode right now, so I'm going to exit play mode and change that to tile. And then if these are still appearing too big, I can just lower the width over here, maybe make it half the size, test it out again. Okay, so these are smaller now, but now they're stretched in the other direction. And the way we're going to fix this up is by going back into the material we created. And then here under the tiling, we're just going to raise this value up a bit, and that's going to sort of shrink it in the other direction. So you just have to kind of mess around with these until you get an effect that looks like what you want. Of course, something else we can do here is we can also add some color to it. So if I click on the color, I can set this up as, I don't know, red to blue. And now we have a red to blue a tiled thing. There we go, looking pretty spiffy so far. Okay, finally, let's make this animate. Now, as I said, I've seen some other tutorials on here that show how to animate a line renderer with shader graphs and this type of stuff. I'm sure it works. It's way more complicated than you need. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go here in Unity. I'm going to open my animations folder. I have a components trajectory line folder. Going to go create animator controller, call it trajectory line. I'm going to make an idle animation. Animation, idle, set that to loop time. We want to make sure it loops. On the input manager, I'm going to attach this trajectory line. And then I'm going to go into the animation. Actually, I have to hook it up first. So animator, drag and drop the idle onto here. Go back into the scene or game view, animation. I want to go here to add property, line renderer. I want to go down to, it is, I think it's this one, material main text underscore st, do plus add. And then I want to click this little drop down arrow over here. And then again, I'm going by memory here, so I believe it is the Z value. I'm just going to animate it so at the start it's 3, and then at the end it is 0. I believe that works. Let's test it out and see if I'm right. Yep, that's it. It works. It is kind of like doing this weird thing though where it's starting and stopping. We don't want that. So the way we just fix that is by going back into this animation here, and then we click the curves tab. I'm just going to hit Control A, right click on one of these dots and say both tangents, I want them to be linear. And then we'll hit play and test that again. Yep, there we go, and now it goes smoothly. And if you want to change that up at all, you can just go to the input, the animator for this script, and you can, I don't know, make it go faster or make it go slower, you know, change these numbers up. Here's a really fast one. If I want it to go the other direction, I just make it, you know, -10 and now it goes inwards. Yeah, that is the easiest way to make it animate. You don't need to do anything more complicated than that. And if you don't want it to animate, well, just get rid of the animator. I can imagine that there are a couple other questions that might come up here, so let me just go over what these are. Number one is, how do I make the line renderer disappear? I didn't show how to do that in the video. That is quite simple. Let's take a look at the code. So in the code, I have this method called handle input, which is being called from update. And basically what I'm doing is on get mouse button up, that's if input.get mouse button up, I'm just telling my trajectory line .enable to be equal to false. If you remember, under trajectory line, show trajectory line, I enabled it to be true. So to make it disappear, I'm just calling false when we do mouse up. Another potential question is, how do you make this line not appear directly over the character? The best way to do that is just to add a little bit of offset. Let's go to the code. So here we have where we're setting the position. This is the dot that's at the defender. So in the X, I can maybe just say plus 0.5f. Could calculate this, make it accurate, but just for showing. And there we go. That's a 0.05 offset, so that looks decent. Again, you can play around with that and actually calculate it to make it more efficient, but in the meantime, that's how you would do that. And then one final question that I could see coming up is, how do you make the lines like actually not curve if you want to have more positions? So for instance, let me just enable this line renderer so it stays on the screen. If I added an extra point and made it, I don't know, 6 and -3, could see it does a weird bend. Make it 9. That's a little more obvious what I'm talking about now. Yeah, the line gets all distorted when you add when you add curves to it, and that's because Unity tries to draw a curve between these lines. It's not really great at making these lines just draw straight segments, so it kind of gets all weird and stretched. I have yet to find like a really good solid way of solving this problem, so I kind of have some dirty hacks on how to approach this. One is just adding separate line renderer components, so you would have one line renderer to draw between here, and then use a second line renderer to draw between here and here. That takes some additional setting up. Another little dirty hack I use just to kind of offset this is you can basically duplicate the array elements here. So if I duplicate and duplicate and duplicate a few times, and then do this down here as well, duplicate, duplicate, you can see all the calculations start to kind of even out as it's just basically redrawing this point over and over, and you get a fairly straight looking line as a result with a little bit of wonkiness in the corners. Again, this is probably not the best way to do it. It is a little bit of a hack, but it does kind of get the result you're looking for if you're just trying to get a perfectly straight line without any weird curves to it. If you do have a better way of doing this, please tell me. I would love to know, because I have searched high and low trying to find a more efficient solution and have not been able to come up with anything. So there we go. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you found this helpful, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that fun YouTube stuff. Thanks very much, and see you next time.